Okay, call to order Hastings-on-Hudson Board of Ed meeting, January 13, 2020. Right. Welcome to the new decade, everyone.
Yay.
Okay, we will kick off the meeting with Dr. Henning Piedmont taking us through some announcements and events in the district.
Absolutely. I hope some of you were able to either attend the parent portion of the Chris Herron presentation. I want to thank, there was a PTSA and SEPTA that sponsored it, and obviously Mr. AdiPietro through his work with Challenge Success and all the other, ways in which he's responding to helping children to, think about, not only bullying, but decisions and around drug use and peer pressure. So Chris Herron's presentation, I think, was really eye-opening for many in the audience. I had an opportunity to attend the evening event, and the panel's discussion that included Mr. AdiPietro and a couple of other members and members of the community were also really well received, and we touched on some of the issues that we talked about relative to our youth assessment data, youth assessment survey. So it was really powerful to watch the documentary the first day, and I'm sure that the conversations are continuing, and that it's a way to engage our students so that they are also providing us with input and feedback with regards to other ways that we can help address some of the issues, that they view to be challenging as well. So that was just really an awesome assembly. I didn't make the assembly, but as I said, that next evening I was at the documentary, the showing of the documentary. So thank you very much. And today, in this very room, we had a district-wide incident command system training session. So that means all of the safety teams in the buildings, the 3 safety teams, came together along with the district team to really practice what we would have to do if we did have a pretty significant situation, whether it was a tornado that touched down, which happened to be the scenario that we practiced today, or something that that happened to a staff member or a student in the district. There's a way to use that ICS system, the incident command system, which is developed by FEMA, to manage how we address situations that are crisis related, that touch all the buildings. And so from who communicates to who organizes safety to who helps our staff or students who might have might be reacting to the situation. So it was a really informative, insightful training session, and we will be organizing a training session every month to practice other scenarios that emerge. Even though the ICS process is developed to deal with horrible things like Columbine, and Parkland, it's typically, unfortunately that's how it's emerged, that we've adopted this, which is a part of a larger federal system of ensuring that school districts respond effectively, which is also aligned with how law enforcement and the other services, emergency services operate. So unfortunately it's arisen from really catastrophic events, but there's a lot that we can do with it just to make sure that we manage how we operate as an entire system. So it was very powerful, and we look forward to future training sessions. And obviously on the 27th is our next board meeting, and we hope that all of you who are here come back and visit with us again. A few other announcements having to do with other activities and events. I want to thank Janine for distributing all of our Hastings happenings. One just went out today, actually, over the weekend. And they include a number of really important events. So at the January 27th board meeting, we'll have a Hillside Outdoor Learning Center presentation by Amy Kazes, John DeCams, and the planning team that's been working for about a year on the Outdoor Learning Center, so that'll be very exciting to listen to. Maureen and I will, I'm not sure if it's how much budget information we'll provide at the January 27th, but we'll certainly kick off with the February board meeting, which is the official start of all the budget presentations which are required throughout the state. So tell your friends so you can come to those. It's very important information that we want to share with you in advance. We'll have another construction project update at that January 27th board meeting, and we'll also have our website redesign presentation. Sylvia and Allison, Janine, Maureen, Melissa, and I have been working with the design team from Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES, which does this work for other school districts in the region. So we're very excited. There's been a lot of input and review, and hopefully you'll be equally excited about how the enhanced look of the website. So that'll be part of that presentation. I also want to mention that today I started the first recording of the Senior Moments podcast with Jude, Avanti, and Kojo. So I asked them, as I hope to ask all the seniors before they leave, to give us some sense of their wisdom, their worries, and their wonderings. And each student, I just wanted to share a little bit, from what I heard from those 3 students, which was very insightful, which is why it's so important to talk to students. So I won't tell you who said what, but this is just sort of a collection of some of their thinking. One student has been here since kindergarten. Another student moved in 2nd grade, and another student moved in as a 9th grader. I think that's, that was not by, I didn't select them on the basis of, that, range. That's just how they came to me. What they talked about were their bonds with teachers, which is really, I think, important. That was one of the first things they talked about. They talked about, or some of the things that they mentioned, they don't know where the one student said he didn't know where he was going to be in 10 years, but he was grateful for being here in Hastings. Another student indicated that students who graduate from Hastings are level-headed, flexible, and open-minded. And another student mentioned that, I quote, "I have a strange confidence that I'll find a place where I belong in the world." Another student mentioned, or as a source of advice, cut out what you don't enjoy. And we ended with one student saying, "Everything will be okay." I just wanted to lock the door and keep them in there and just listen to them all afternoon long. I mean, that's what the podcast is about, to capture that. So that will be promoted, pushed out on our website. We'll remind you, because I think it is important for us to remember that we are in this business because we want this to be the experience for every student. That it isn't sort of random, but that this is what happens for students in Hastings. So I'm just delighted to have been a part of the conversation with them. On another note, with another podcast, I don't know the name of this yet, but it's a podcast to capture moments of great teaching and to talk to our teachers about teaching and what they do to engage students and to, cause the students to develop a passion for a content area or area that they're studying. So my first subject was Melissa Shandroff, our science chair person. So we talked about the work that she's done to encourage more students to be interested in science research. And I have recording sign-up or meetings that I'm going to have with 2 of her students, as I asked 2 of her students to also, kind of talk to us about the experience that they were having. So that's very exciting, and obviously Ms. Szymanski is going to be involved in her own way in promoting this as a way in which we tell the story of the system through the lives of our students and our staff members and professionals. On February 6th, there's a budget vote, and what we tried to do in our newsletter, our winter newsletter, which I'm sure all of you have read like at least 4 or 5 times. And you've paid attention to information on pages 10 through 16, and that most importantly, you listened to the little video that Maureen and I did, which was, a way in which we're just, going into parts of the story that we started telling in Hastings Happenings, the winter newsletter, to help our public to understand, what sort of the basis of the February 6th vote and why it isn't a May vote, and why there's a need to use the repair reserve to pay for additional costs that are associated with some changes that were made in the original design. So more of that will be happening, and there'll also be one that will involve our board members talking about different segments of this as well, and that'll be produced and shared out. So that, again, you hear from us. So if community members aren't able to come to board meetings, there'll be some other resources that they can access. So we look forward to sharing those. On February 6th as well, we're having our third annual Rivertown Schools Diversity Career Fair, and actually it's being hosted here in Hastings. So we'll have it upstairs in the cafeteria from 4 to 7. And it includes the following districts: Ardsley, Dobbs Ferry, Edgemont, obviously Hastings, and Irvington. And it's a way for us to encourage teachers who may not think about teaching in Hastings to teach here, from different backgrounds and cultures and so forth. And so that's very exciting. And I want to thank the administrators in advance who are going to be there to interview candidates, and to, whether we have positions available or not, we want to make sure that we are collecting resumes, and we're talking to people, and we're promoting what's really wonderful about Hastings and why we should have a line out of the door of people wanting to come here, because they should. I mentioned our incident command training. I want to thank Lou tonight and his team for making their PBIS plan. He's been working for a little while to pull this together, so thank you, Lou, for getting a jump start on this. As you know, we administered a school climate survey recently, and so that the findings from that survey, in addition to some recommendations for how to address it, are going to be presented at the February 10th board meeting. So please mark your calendar so you're here for that. Tonight we had scheduled with the PTSA and SEPTA a presentation on a math tutoring survey that was administered last year. We had also asked the PTSA and SEPTA leadership to share with us some of the programs that they fund to support students and staff and our parents, and we moved that presentation to February 10th, so please mark your calendars for that. A scheduling consultant is working with the middle school tomorrow through the 16th. Lou and his team will be there for part of their discussion, their analysis tomorrow. And that person will be at both the middle school and the high school, but from the 14th to the 16th. And then the 21st to the 23rd, that individual will be at Hillside working with that team. So the objective on the first day in both schools is to really engage in an analysis with the team of the schedule, like what are the challenges and the barriers. The other part of the conversation that day would be contractual obligations and how we're meeting those, or how how the schedule is conflicted with regards to trying to meet those. And then what's needed to ensure growth and access and equity for all students, and that's an important part of the analysis on the first day. And in addition, what are the proposed or required staffing changes, if any? Because that's obviously going to be part of the conversation. So that's day one. Day two will be beginning to work on constructing a model that addresses all of the challenges and barriers, all of the contractual obligations, and all of the equity, access, growth issues, and and obviously we hope there's no increases in staff, but at the very least, really using people in the best ways, and making sure that we are judicious about those very valuable resources. And the third day will be kind of running a schedule. Obviously, we can't use eSchool data because we're in the current year, so we can't load data in for the 2020-21 school year. We don't have like a sandbox for that, but they're going to create through their sort of boards, scheduling boards, sort of the best example of what a schedule would look like to address all these areas, and then identify those conflicts in the schedule. So they'll be doing that kind of old school, but it'll really put us in a good place in terms of going into the new school year, that we know we've dealt with those things that have stood in the way of students being successful, and that's the priority, is to get those things out of the way. On Friday, in this room, Tracy Tyler, who was the supervisor of literacy and learning at Southern Westchester BOCES, was here to work with our educators at the middle school. It was her kickoff session on differentiated instruction. She did a really extraordinary job of kind of gaining a sense of what people already knew, and dealing with some of the myths, if you will, through a Kahoot session, which is a digital sort of test, multiple choice test with fun, where people really game. If you really want to see competition, watch teachers engage in a Kahoot session. There was hooting and hollering, and they were over very simple things, but they were really interested in learning, and I think that it served its purpose. And at the end, there was an assessment given by the consultant, and that assessment or survey was a way for her to sort of understand, so what are the next things? What are those things that people are interested in and want to know more about? And also, who's interested in being a coaching partner? So there are people who have knowledge and, can share. So, that's a wonderful way for us to celebrate the internal expertise, but also to acknowledge that there may be teachers who do need more than, more than what we provided on Friday. And once Tracy analyzes that data, she'll reconvene a meeting with Ms. Kipper, Mr. Keel, Ms. Szymanski, and myself, and we'll go through planning the next late start Friday, plus some other opportunities. So that's very exciting. And I think that beyond that, we have a conversation about advocacy, which I'll save for that conversation. So thank you very much.
Okay.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Can I just say something, Valerie? I wanted to say that listening to everything, what I loved hearing about was your conversation with the seniors and really getting a chance to know sort of what a random group of what Hastings kids are like and what their experience is of going to school in this district and going through the district. I think it's great that you had that.
It's a high moment.
Yep.
And and the reason why the podcast is so important is that you get to hear it, and so you get to share in the high moment.
Great.
Thank you.
Ms. Szymanski, do you have?
I do.
Looks like maybe a couple of things got a little covered here, but
yes.
yeah.
So differentiated instruction and diversity recruitment fair, Valerie spoke to. I have been working with the building leadership teams, Maureen, and a few of the parents to establish a district green team committee. So this group will be comprised of parents, administrators, teachers, aides, custodians, and students to ensure collaborative, vertically coherent, and successful efforts. So the group is really interested in working together to identify some small wins district-wide. And until now, there's been back and forth between a number of people and a number of administrators. So we're just going to pull it all together so that we're collaborating towards some common goals. Science RFP and grants. So over the course of the year, I've been working with the building leaders and Melissa Shandroff and Robin Farrell down at Hillside. Over at Hillside around the science program, K-12, and an RFP was issued to secure a science expert who's very well connected at the state level and will work directly with teams of teachers to develop a deeper understanding of the new New York State P-12 science learning standards, and then really begin to articulate consensus around instructional shifts and develop transition plans for the grade levels. So Helen Pashley was identified, and I worked with the Edith Winthrop Teacher Center and secured a grant so that funding for the work will be provided from an outside source in its entirety. So that is being covered thanks to Edith Winthrop.
And there's no cost to the district?
No cost to the district at all. So today Helen met with building leaders and Melissa Shandroff and Robin Farrell and myself and really did what we had intended to do, really consolidate a scope of the work for the school year, outline goals and an action plan, review the New York State Ed timeline for implementation, and share current updates from around the state science assessment. It will be shifting. So next year this year there will be an assessment, and then there will be no assessment, and then it will come in 5th grade. In terms of the 4th grade. So there are some really big shifts happening, and the standards have changed considerably this time around. We unpacked the Achieve Next Generation Science Standards District Implementation Indicators document as part of a conversation so that we could identify some specific needs across the grade bands. We discussed some work that's already been accomplished in the district so that we can build on the strengths of what's already happened, and then really thinking about a transition plan. So the next step will be some days that are allocated directly to the teachers in the system, and that will span all 3 buildings. Since our last administrative update, I met twice with the Professional Learning Committee. During our December session, we explored the concept of an ed camp, and then we engaged in one right then and there. Members of the committee facilitated and visited the learning session offerings, and during the debrief, the participants identified links to the New York State Professional Learning Standards. So this is the group that will be generating some ideas in preparation for our March Superintendent's Conference Day based on a professional learning survey that was also administered to every single stakeholder district-wide, regardless of role. During the January meeting, the group analyzed the faculty and staff survey that was administered, and then in breakout groups, we designed a template to organize information. We categorized areas of interest that we saw based on the survey results. We determined stakeholder groups that were underrepresented in the survey data. So certain groups answered more than other groups did, so we went back out again to make sure that that was representative, and then we planned for some next steps. So that work is ongoing. Earlier in the school year, I encouraged Nora Bertacci, who's our World Languages Chair, to consider presenting at the Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES World Languages Conference. She and Stephen Lopez designed a workshop, and it was really aimed at telling the stories of the Seal of Biliteracy journey here in Hastings. They really did a fabulous job. It put Hastings on the map. They presented to colleagues, to administrators throughout both Putnam County and Westchester County. And they offered a timeline. They gave some examples of artifacts that qualified for the Seal of Biliteracy, and they shared some resources. And they will be presenting in the spring to the board, so you'll have more of an opportunity to hear the specifics of that. And then finally, Chair Council. The department chairs and coordinators met together for the December and January Chair Council meetings since we last spoke together. Members finished reading the text, What School Could Be, by Ted Dintersmith, as we've all been reading. And at the December meeting, they worked individually to memorialize different takeaways from each chapter. They worked with a text rendering protocol in groups of 3 or 4. So they identified sentences and then phrases and then words that resonated. And then they took all of that and they synthesized it to think about important implications and how they interpreted it and themes. And then earlier today, we came back together again and we engaged in a text-based seminar. So it was really a loose protocol where we had an ongoing discussion after having a gallery walk of everything that had been done in the previous session. And we explored the framing question, how do we know that we're really doing the right things in the area of curriculum, instruction, and assessment? And we had a really fruitful conversation. So that's where we are with curriculum, instruction, and assessment.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, I
do you
just have a
wanna-
couple things
Yeah,
before,
okay.
because then we'll have the presentation. Okay. Okay, so this week, we're waiting for the governor will be releasing his executive budget. Based on some preliminary information that's been given at the state level in terms of their own financial, where they are, it doesn't seem like there'll be an increase of anything in our foundation aid, but the governor has spoke about putting some additional funds in areas such as STEAM and UPK, which has been a focus of his. And, we'll see how that, a lot of times there's like grant money allocated for those purposes. What we're really just hoping is that we won't see a cut, and nor will we see any changes in formulas, which has been something that the governor has been putting out there the last few years, specifically capping expense-driven aids, which would be hurtful to a district like ours, that when we spend more money in different areas, it helps generate aid back to the district, especially in BOCES, excess cost aids, and transportation. So, hopefully the legislators will be successful in pushing back. That has a real direct hit on districts such in Westchester County and like Long Island. Those type of aids are really critical, that there's no change in those formulas. I'll be updating the board at the next meeting when we have that kind of first cut of where the governor's coming out, and that should be this week. We're still waiting on the final tax cap calculation from the state as well. Last year, we did receive that number in late January. We've already received our growth factor, which is 1.01%, which is good news because that'll be in addition to whatever the CPI is. So again, that's why Valerie had mentioned when we are going to be presenting the budget, we have to wait to kind of get all these numbers so that we can kind of finalize some things before the presentation. The good news is that we have seen a recent change in the local sales tax percentage, which is driving a considerable increase in that revenue to the district, and we're anticipating at least another $100,000 in our next year's allocation from the local government. As far as the bond, the architects continue to work on the plans for the middle school auditorium as well as the music classroom renovations, and we hope to have an update within the next few weeks of their progress. There will be an initial design share with the board hopefully in the next 2 to 4 weeks or so. The 2 infrastructure projects are designed, and we're waiting to hear back comments from the state on those, and we hope to have those 2 projects approved in the next few months. And then with the drop of the interest rate, we should be receiving a very favorable rate in our upcoming ban or bond issue. The financial advisors had given us a rate of close to 3.75 when we initially went out with our pre-bond information, and right now the rates are below 2%. We're going to hold off to see. The Fed is likely to cut the rate again this year before we borrow, and hopefully we'll be seeing a considerable savings in where we borrow versus where we thought we would be borrowing at.
Great. Thank you.
For once,
You mentioned,
yes.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I said that it's good news when you need to borrow money. It's great news, but when you don't have the money on your investments, it's not great. But for us, it's working in our favor right now.
It is, absolutely. And I just wanted to mention that our next book, our book study, is most likely to succeed, preparing our kids for the innovation era. So hopefully you have also looked at our website and seen our upcoming book study dates, and that you purchase the book and that you join one of the book studies. So we look forward to you coming out for that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, Clay and Sophia, do you guys have anything?
I guess. So I'll say some, I guess Sophia will say some. So I know this weekend a bunch of athletic accomplishments happened. Like we had the league meet for track, which I'm not part of, although I heard it was a really big success. I saw a lot of medals on Instagram, so I'm assuming that we did really, really good. And then there also was a wrestling meet, which I'm actually on the wrestling team, and 3 of us got medals, which I know most people don't even know we have a wrestling team, but it was really cool that we did kind of really good. That was one of our first tournaments of the year. And there's also a new kid named Asher, and he almost medaled on his first wrestling meet ever.
Wow.
Which was like really hard, and it was really cool watching him.
That's great.
I know that everyone loved the 2-week break. There's no denying that. But it was kind of hard coming back with only 2 weeks until midterms. There was no transition period that we usually have after break. So there's been a lot of stress, but okay stress because we had the break. The environmental club at our last meeting printed and designed new stickers for all the garbage cans in classrooms in order to try and prevent cross-contamination of paper, food items, recycling. Additionally, the Environmental Club is also planning an event on February 28th called Beatles for Beatles, where local Hastings bands are going to play Beatles covers to raise money for beetle conservationists. Insect conservationists. Insects are a staple of many ecosystems, and if insects die, it will just go up the food chain. So we hope to raise money and awareness at this event. Also, the Amnesty International Club is planning an event called the Charity Slam. It's going to be on March 7th, where people of all ages can come and present a charity they're passionate about and hope to raise awareness and money about whatever organization or charity they want to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Okay, public comment. If you have something, please keep to 3 minutes and share your name and if you're a resident of Hastings. Okay. Moving on. Okay, we'll pass it back to Ms. Carvalho to kick us off with the construction
I'll go to the
project update.
Okay. So tonight, the purpose of this capital bond update, there's been some questions that I know people, some of our public has had, and I'm sure these are things that as we're going out and speaking about this upcoming vote that Valerie had mentioned, we've been trying to address some items that we may think would be helpful to people and some questions they may have around this upcoming referendum on February 6th. First, I'm just again to remind everyone, I had mentioned it earlier in my comments, that there are 2 projects that are currently fully designed. They're in the state. That includes both the Hillside Infrastructure Project. It was submitted to the state in December. It includes the roofing, the repointing of Hillside, floor replacement in the lower corridor, and window replacement project. All of these projects are currently at the state and are all at least they were all quoted within the bond, pre-bond budget. So in all of these, we haven't gone to the construction project yet, but we're below what we anticipated our costs would be in these areas, so that's good news. In our Farragut Infrastructure Project, which is submitted in January 2020, we have the roofing project here, a new boiler that Joe can't wait to get, repointing of the building, replacing the parapet around the building, a floor replacement in various wings of this complex, as well as replacing the current elevator lift. Again, all of these projects, some of which came in under our pre-bond budget, and all others are falling within the scope of work. So we're waiting to hear comments. We submitted to the state. Typically, they may have not comments to me, but to our architects, if they have anything in the engineering phase that they have questions about. So we're hoping both of these projects will be able to bid out them in the next few months, with the start in the end of June. Okay, so I try to put together some of them are based upon some questions we think people may have. Some of them we've tried to address in our recent newsletter, but we are keeping our website and putting a lot of information and presentations up there to make sure that people, if they have some of these same questions, that we will keep this information updated. So we've heard some questions about what we're going out and we're asking the public to authorize the full amount of the capital reserve to be used if it's necessary. So the question here is, what if we don't need the entire $1.3 million from the capital reserve that you're requesting in the upcoming February 6th vote? What then would happen with the funds that would not need to be accessed? So we are asking for the authorization, and that's the way you have to do it. But technically, the money stays in the capital reserve until there's a need arises that we would then need to take the funds out of there. But without the authorization, we didn't feel comfortable moving forward with this project. So if the entire amount is not needed, we would take the money out of there as necessary as we're paying down the projects. And we'll obviously have a much better sense of that once we go out to bid and when we're in the construction phase. So again, this would be at the end of our spending after our bond. This would be like the last amount. We would access what we would need to finish this project. And then if not, it just remains in there for other uses in the future if necessary. If an emergency repair was needed, how is the district going to address this? And this is really trying to address the fact that we are taking money out of a reserve account. So then if other things were to become outside of the bond scope, what would our, how would we handle that? So currently, in each operational budget, we always have funds available for capital improvements, repairs. We also have line items actually called emergency repairs, because when you go into with the facilities that we do have, we do earmark not a considerable amount of money, but about between $50,000 to $100,000 in each yearly budget that at the establishment of the budget, we're we don't necessarily have anything planned for that work, but in the event something comes up. So if there was something beyond that that would come up and we didn't have additional ways to cover it in our current operating budget, then the board could in fact take money out of other reserve funds if the repair exceeded something that we couldn't address. And then if not, we hope to reestablish, I think what should be our goal, whatever we end up using out of this current balance, would be to, as we have done in the past, to refund when we have the availability of additional funds. And additional funds, the way we are able to get those funds back in there is when we have some excess. I had mentioned earlier, to say the sales tax. If sales tax revenues come in and exceed our projections, that's how money gets back to these reserves at year's end. So, and the other piece just also is many of the emergency repairs that happen in the building are in fact covered by insurance. If a pipe breaks or something of that nature, even with a recent crack in our boiler, those things are all covered by insurance. So many things are covered by insurance. Those that aren't, we have funds available for, and anything that would exceed that, then we would have to either come up with a strategy to address it. I think the good thing is so many things are being addressed, and some larger, not so many large ticket items that are of concern, boilers, roofing, things of that nature are now being addressed in this current bond. So we're feeling very comfortable with that. Why are we using the capital reserve for the Hillside project? Is this a correct use of the funds? So capital and repair reserve funds are set up to address upgrades and repairs of district facilities as described by state law. There's requirements around it. You have to demonstrate a need for them. They're the capital reserve fund was voter established, voter approved, and voter funded. And the only way you can get money out of there is that it has to be voted on by our public as well. So in how we're using them and the establishment of what our capital fund was established for, it is one of the rationales we had used in the initial establishment of the fund. It includes additions, repairs, capital projects, as well as a host of other things. So we are in fact, authorized to use it. And in terms of the decision to transfer the repair monies to the capital reserve, when we had initially set it up, I think, we wanted to have money in both areas. And what I found, it really makes the most sense to be deliberate in the use of these funds, because when you do it through capital, which means it's required then to be voted on by the public, it then makes the project eligible to receive state reimbursement for the work of the entire amount. So in thinking about it, I would even go as far as to say I would think that it's best to fund the capital reserve in the future more so than the repair reserve, because then we can be deliberate and then also receive state aid back. And our state aid rate, as the board knows, is 42.4% reimbursement on every dollar we spend. So again, with this amount, we are going to receive, if it's in fact voter approved, which it has to be in order for us to access it, then we would be receiving state aid back on that $1.3 million. The district currently has capital and infrastructure needs as noted on the current BCS, and BCS, as you see below, is a building condition survey. With the current recommended use of the reserve funds, how will these be funded? So here, the building condition survey is really a tool that is required by the state. We're actually not required to submit it anymore. It used to be required, and but it is a tool that we keep, and it's for the purposes of identifying work and looking at your buildings based upon the age and condition of a building such as this, and really being thoughtful and placing items and thinking about how, not losing sight of those as you're developing your operational budgets and thinking of your capital bond and planning. So it is a living document. It helps districts plan for things. There's no requirement under the state to do any of this work. And as an example, we had one for many years and we didn't do any capital work for like 10 years. Although we had things, they moved on to like the next 5-year group. That working document helped us develop what our current bond is and why we prioritize those particular items. And other items that are on there, in looking at it in discussing with Joe and the architects, much of the work can be really spread over the next 10 years. We identified in the current 5 to kind of not lose sight of it. And then as we're thinking about our budgets and when money becomes available, we then prioritize that. And then if we're unable to accomplish it, those things then move over to the next 5-year period. And as an example, this would be an area when I spoke about replenishing the reserve funds. As we're thinking, we do have needs that we're going to have. So that's why it's very important as district funds, we have excess funds in a particular fiscal year, we should be thinking about prioritizing and putting money back into those funds, because that's how you're able to address some of these items as well. If Hillside currently has over 10 classrooms that are 900 square feet, why are we building additional larger size classrooms? And I think part of it, we have identified in the new addition that the classrooms upstairs will be used for kindergarten. And we do, in fact, currently have enough classrooms to support kindergarten, but in terms of where the classrooms are in the building, it made sense to have those they're in the kindergarten hallway, and in looking about where different sections of classes and realigning not departments, but grade levels to be in certain places, the decision was made. I think initially we had thought about using them for a different purpose, but it wasn't as though we didn't have enough kindergarten classrooms. It's just really to do with the location. But then in looking at our overall classrooms in the building, the majority of our K-1-2 classrooms are, in fact, over 900 square feet. The exception being we have 3 current second grade classrooms that are not. They're about 800. And what that also allows, a 900 square foot classroom has an actual bathroom inside the classroom. So it is appropriate for children in K-1-2 to really have a bathroom within the classroom, especially that's what was one of the reasons as we looked at the area. It does give us greater flexibilities with those classrooms, because that is, we only have a few, like I said, currently, unfortunately, that are for second grade that do not have the bathroom. But in thinking about when you're building the new classroom, it is advantageous, especially in elementary school, to have that type of classroom that then can be used for kindergarten, and those other classrooms would then be used for second grade. So we would have the entire K-1-2 in larger size classrooms with the bathroom inside it. And I think as we talk about security and thinking about the training today, even in this building, they keep the classroom doors locked in the middle school. They don't during class time. So really, I'm sure just from a perspective of younger children being able to kind of go to the bathroom in the classroom and not have to kind of walk to a centralized location, I think it was preferable to us to have the larger classrooms in that wing. And they will, in fact, be used as kindergarten, but the existing kindergarten classes would then be either repurposed for first or second grade. And we will have the connection now with the elevator downstairs, so that'll be, we'll be able to realign some of the sections. What would be the cost savings if we reduce the size of the proposed classrooms down to 770 square feet, which is pretty much the legal requirement of a classroom at the elementary school? But again, as we look through the building, the majority of our classrooms, including 3rd and 4th grade, are in 800 square foot. So this would actually be even smaller than what we currently have at Hillside. So although there are some costs increase, there is a cost increase with having those now larger classrooms on both the 1st and 2nd floor. But in talking to the construction manager, they really said by scaling these classrooms back a few hundred feet, you weren't necessarily going to have the cost savings equivalent to kind of getting this particular project back into our original scope of budget. Because part of it is that you're not going to necessarily, although we've been speaking about this project in terms of square feet, and there is definitely an increase in having a larger building, but you're not necessarily in those classroom spaces going to get the savings equivalent to 100 square feet times that $490 square foot amount, because it's a blended cost. So there's parts of the building, although the entire building is, we speak about it's this much and then divided by the square footage, but certainly there's parts of the building like the cafetorium that could be 700 square feet, $700. If we were just building that, it would be a much higher square foot cost. So in terms of when we looked at scaling back, at least in particular the classrooms, we weren't going to necessarily receive the cost savings that would have gotten us back into our budget. Why are we didn't initially think about the retractable seating, so is this something that we could perhaps do at a later time? So the retractable seating was a factor in the increase of the cost of the Hillside estimate. Both the cost of the seating as well as the additional square feet to house them are part of the overall cost increase. Although we believe the seating is necessary and will best serve the use of the space, when the bid documents are created, this item will be listed as an alternate. And this is fairly typical in your bidding strategy. There'd be many parts of this bond that we're going to do as alternates, and that way we have the flexibility when the bids are received, if they're favorable, we can then award that. I think what we would do is we would construct the area to allow for those seats to be, if not purchased at that point, at a later time. So I think that is something that had been discussed in terms of like a bidding strategy if in fact we move forward with this full project. So I think at that point we'll have better information later, and that's something we could always think about. But again, we would want to construct at least the space to allow for that. What were some of the factors that led the board to seek additional funding for this project? Why didn't they just resign? So I think as we know, the design that we received with the pricing at that point, again, and with some of the information given to us by our construction manager, there would be, there was an issue in terms of timing of this project, in terms of being able to start it. In addition, some of the price escalation, it would have really required that design to be kind of redone because they were seeing a lot of escalation due to just pricing of materials for the design. And in terms of any type of delay in it, there's also a cost of not doing things in a timely basis. And again, just using some factors here, if the project needs to be delayed, there will be a cost in the delay because we are seeing typically the escalation at the lease is 4% a year, and that's a fairly good number. I mean, that's the number they use. That's pretty consistent in the industry. And then also it would require an extension of certain professionals' contracts because it would be then a 3-year project. Okay. Will the use of the capital reserve affect our bond rating? So I do feel very strongly about keeping our reserve balances as healthy as possible. And I think in looking at where we currently are, and certainly using any money out of our reserves is always a factor when we think about bonding and we think about, going out to get a bond. So I would say that if, we have to be mindful when we're creating our operational budget. I think we've spoken a lot about this, or I've spoken a lot about to this point when we speak about weaning ourselves off of balancing our operational budget on reserves. And that's really more of the capital reserve is set up to be used for capital projects. Like that is the direct rationale for setting up that reserve. But really being mindful of our use of, using tax cert reserves to support an operational budget. So I would say that, going into last year, we started that process in terms of weaning or lessening the amount of fund balance we were using to balance our operational budget. That will be continued. That there's there's a plan to continue with that. So that's kind of helping keep our reserve balances by not, pulling so much of that just to kind of balance our operational budget and being more thoughtful and finding ways to, get our operational budget tighter. That's going to be really important as we think about our reserve balance. But in terms of where we are now in our bond rating, we're hopeful in our planning of our, current year's budget that will keep our fund balance our overall fund balance at a level in which will help us get a favorable bond rating. But you do have to be mindful of that at all times too. So that's it. So I'll be continuing these as questions come up. They may be things other people may be thinking of as well as we, think about going into the vote.
And Maureen and I will cover these in, budget videos and podcasts and so forth. So we'll keep reiterating some of these really important points. So thank you, Maureen.
One thing I just wanted to raise, the idea of the board members doing part of the videos, one of my concerns with that is legally us potentially veering into advocacy positions. And so I wonder, maybe what we can do is take that offline and talk about the best strategy for that, because I think our legal counsel may want to get involved in those in a detailed way, which could be time and energy prohibitive. That's one concern that I have.
Well, it's the same for me. I'm an official too. So I have to make sure I'm not advocating, and I think we need to, there's a lot of facts to be presented, and I think using the newsletter is a good way to approach just sharing the facts so that they see that you have skin in the game, and it isn't, Maureen or myself presenting, but this is the board's vote. This is your budget, And we want to make sure we're doing everything possible. And if you think of it as a way in which we present, non-traditional information, which in some cases don't necessarily come up in our regular, traditional budget presentations, you wouldn't hear some of these points. And I think certainly no one can accuse us of advocating during this first presentation. I think if you wanted to, you could. But, we were steering clear of that to stay as fact-focused as possible. And I wouldn't want the public to interpret your non-participation as reticence. So that would be an equal worry, that it would be, why aren't the board members speaking about this too, whether it be here in the board meetings itself or through some other means. So I totally agree with you that we do have to make sure we're not veering into advocacy, but I think we also want to make sure that we're presenting facts that the public, understands and has an opportunity to hear from all of us.
Okay, let's talk. We'll continue to talk about that. Okay. Anyone have anyone on the board thoughts on construction project? Going once, going twice? Okay. Okay, with that, we've got Mr. DiPietro here for a presentation of the high school PBIS plan. I will kick it over to you.
First of all, let me apologize. It's been a long day. I thought I had a brown jacket on, so I don't match.
We didn't know that
Those are the
first.
fashion police that's out there.
We didn't want to say anything.
This was supposed to be brown. I grabbed the wrong jacket, but it's okay. It's been a long day.
We have to postpone it to March, Lou, because this is offensive to us.
If my assistant principal, who went home ill today, who was supposed to do this presentation with me, was here, she'd be all over me, but that's okay. I do want to echo one thing that Jody echoed earlier, is that I want to thank both Melissa and Valerie for getting to know who our students are. This is my 15th year here, and no matter what mood I come in to work every day, the moment I see our kids, I'm instantly in a great mood. We have wonderful kids. Our community is wonderful. And I hope you're appreciating what I've learned to love in this community of Hastings. So I wanted to thank you both for giving an opportunity, sort of just getting to know who we are. And I think that's important. So thank you from all of us at the administrative staff. Okay, so I want to set the stage for you guys a little bit. Back in November, early November, in one of our building meetings, Melissa and Valerie looked at me and said, Lou, you should really do, and then they didn't use these exact words, but this is what I got out of it, was you should really look at PBIS at the high school. It's part of your MTSS plan. It's an added piece to that umbrella. It's part of the MTSS plan. And, as a good soldier, I looked at them and I smiled and I absolutely, Valerie, and so forth and so on. And the moment they walked out the door, a level of anxiety went through me, and a little bit of skepticism as well. And I've shared all of this with Valerie and Melissa, so they know I'm not speaking out of turn. And part of me said, "There's no way we're doing this at the high school." But I started to research PBIS. I started to talk to some of my colleagues, and the more and more I sort of sunk my nose into things, what kept coming up was, why aren't we doing this already? And I've shared this with Valerie in that, I went from a skeptic to a real advocate of this kind of work, because it involves systems change. And we've been doing things, and part of the Dinter Smith book is, we keep doing the things the same way, and they're not always the right way, but we do it harder, and maybe that'll fix it. But we have to start doing things a little bit differently, and that's what's going to come up in this presentation. I will tell you, the presentation's not a long one, but it kind of hits all of the points in a lot of the work that we have to do moving forward. All right, so I just wanted to set the stage for you, so you understand where all of this came from. PBIS, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to give you a definition that I think, and if you Google PBIS, there's 100 definitions, right? But I think this is a good definition, and I'm going to take bits and pieces of it for you. Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, PBIS, is an evidence-based, three-tiered framework for improving and integrating all of the data, the systems, and practices affecting student outcomes every day. It is a way to support everyone, to create the kinds of schools where all students are successful. PBIS isn't a curriculum you purchase or something you learn during a one-day professional development training. It is a commitment to addressing student behavior through systems change. When it is implemented well, students achieve improved social and academic outcomes, and schools experience reduced exclusionary discipline practices, and school personnel feel more effective. And I think that sort of sums up what our goal is. So, who's doing this work at the high school? If you look at that list, and this is a list that no one was forced to be part of. I put out a feeler. I asked, anybody want to help us with this work? And every single person up there volunteered to be part of our committee. If you look, there are some middle school educators on there as well, because the middle school has gone through PBIS in the past, and Shannon Mulholland, in particular, a grade 5 teacher, came to my office and says, you have to put me on the committee. I've got so much to say. So that is our committee. We've met twice. To be honest with you, the first 2 meetings have been spent by really identifying what PBIS is and all of us trying to get on the same page. So it's slow, but it's steady progress. So what does PBIS look like, and what is it all about? Okay, so in order to put in school-wide PBIS, if you look at that graphic there, you can see that systems, data, and practices intertwine, and ultimately they will form outcomes. So what is that? We're looking at all of our data, and what kind of data could we be looking at? For instance, we'll be looking at the climate survey data that we just put out there. Valerie, Melissa, myself, and the other Melissa will be unpacking that this week. We're going to be looking at our challenge success data. We'll be looking at referrals, discipline data, suspensions, vaping, you name it. We're going to be looking at all of that data as part of our committee. Practices, what do we mean by practices? How are we going to roll out our initiatives? What are we going to do? Everything needs to be research-based and needs to work together. The system is, how does our school operate now, and what are we looking to achieve? And finally, outcome is, what is the ultimate goal of the program? So all of that works together. The defining principles of a school-wide PBIS program, basically the what, the why, the how, and the who. We want to develop a continuum of research-based behavior and academic interventions and supports. We'll go into that in a little more detail soon. We have all of this data. It's time to look at it and solve some of our problems using that data to make really sound decisions. Create an environment and arrange an environment to prevent the development and the occurrence of poor behavior. Beginning of the year, we had a swastika drawn in the bathroom. We were reactive. It's time to become proactive. Teach and encourage pro-social skills and behaviors. Implement evidence-based behavioral practices with fidelity. And when I mean fidelity is that we have to stay on target with all of our interventions. And then universally screen. All of this needs to be for everyone and not just an exclusionary group. So, we talked a little bit about the MTSS umbrella. And if you look at the umbrella, the left side is your academic piece, your right side is your social emotional piece. PBIS fits under the social emotional piece of your MTSS umbrella. If students are not safe, are not happy, are not performing with behavioral expectations, the academics are going to suffer. So that's where it fits in the grand scheme of things. This is an interesting graphic, and I want to talk a little bit about this a little. This also looks like our RTI pyramid. There are 3 levels of support: Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. With academics, everyone is universally screened. Those who need a little bit extra help go into Tier 2. Those who really need intensive help would go into Tier 3. It's no different with PBIS. All of our research practices will be for everyone. That would be our Tier 1, universal prevention, universal goals, universal rubrics, and outcomes. Then we need to target some individuals who need that little extra push, a little extra guidance, and those would go under Tier 2. And if you look at the percentages, about 5 or 10% of our student body should fall under that number. And then those who are really, really struggling and need that intensive support, such as behavioral plans and so forth, they would fall under Tier 3. So what do we need to do? What are our preliminary activities that need to happen? Well, one is to assemble the PBIS implementation team, which we have already done. We've met twice, as I said. We need to identify our expectations. What does it look like, the behavior in classrooms, in hallways, in cafeterias, in our library, at assemblies, during athletic events? And we'll work with our athletic director on that as well. Develop behavioral expectation benchmarks. Define what the problem behavior is and articulate that to students and have them understand why, to our staff, to our parents. What are we doing now that works? What are we doing now that doesn't work? Analyze the data, of course, and then develop research-based supports based on the data. In addition, we need to develop rubrics for the expected behavior. Many schools have done this in the past, but they're not cookie-cutter rubrics. They have to fit who we are as Hastings, and there's a lot of work to be done there. So we'll do that as a team and include who we need to include. None of this works if you don't have the investment of the faculty. So the faculty will need some professional learning. And what does that look like? It varies. It's everywhere from consultants to administrative push-in to conversation. We need to define for them what PBIS is. What does it look like at the high school? It's not what the middle school does. It's not what the elementary school does. You know, I can envision our first faculty meeting when we talk about PBIS, and the first hand will go up, are we handing out B stickers like the middle school does? We need to get past that. We need to talk about what the high school goal would be. So clarify our goals. We need to work with them to develop that rubric for the classroom and what the expectations are. Now remember, it's not just student expectations. It's also faculty expectations. Define and promote student and teacher incentives. One thing that kids are always asking about is when we bring in dances back. Well, those are something maybe we can earn back. The goal is reinforcing positive behavior. And then obviously we always have to reassess, observe, and debrief. So that's for the faculty. It's similar for the students. Define for the students what PBIS is, clarify our goals, articulate what that rubric is going to look like for classroom expectations and everywhere else. Define and develop and promote student incentives. One thing you learn about a high school student is if the adults come up with it, they don't want it. But if the students come up with it, the exact same plan, they're all in. I'll give you an example. We've been trying to put on a talent show for 2 years. Never had success putting on a talent show. The student union has now sponsored a talent show. And it's happening because they developed it, it was their idea, and then we've supported it. So it's important that the students get buy-in. And of course, we're constantly checking in. This is an aggressive timeline. Let me tell you that. But I wanted to put some dates in there to sort of keep us as a team goal-oriented. We've assembled a team, so number one is checked off. We've started to unpack PBIS. Our next step is to really look at the data and then come up with goals of what we want to accomplish. Set the benchmarks for the behavior, develop the expectations, articulate those expectations to faculty and students, then develop those rubrics, develop our incentives and awards, and remember that the incentives and the rewards are ever-changing, and then implement our kickoff if we can possibly implement that kickoff by the fall of next year. That's, again, that is a pretty, aggressive expectation, but I'd love to be able to do it. In my research, two quotes really stuck by me, and I thought you guys should get them. The goal of PBIS is not perfect children. Rather, the goal should be to create the perfect environment for enhancing their growth. And listen to what the children are saying with or without their words. Listen well with your eyes to what they are trying to tell you, and listen with your heart to what they hope you will hear. Our students act out because something's going on. They won't always tell you. We're lucky enough to have an environment where discipline is a secondary factor, but it's happening. Our students come to school with baggage, like we all do. Many of us adults have built strategies within themselves where they check that at the door. Sometimes our kids can't do that. So we have to develop an environment around them to make that easier for them. And that's it. Questions?
This is great. Thank you, Lou. And I look forward to seeing the process as it rolls out. I'm wondering, if you were to communicate, your best outcomes, what would you? It's 2 years from now, and this is working well. What's happening?
A system where referrals are no longer needed, where we're celebrating students maybe once a month who have excelled and done everything right, who have a story to share, where bullying sort of has gone down to a minimal level, a place where students come to work, or I say work, but it is work, but school where they feel safe, and I think they do feel safe, but I also think they sometimes question the adults in the room and their motivation. So I think it's a place where they come in and trust everyone implicitly, and know that the adults in the building really have their back and will bend that extra mile whenever they need it, and not be reactionary. We react when something happens, but we're never proactive in any other way. So rewards-based and incentive for really doing everything the right way, and I'd like to see the faculty rewarded as well, in some sort of an incentive program from them as well.
Thank you. Anybody else?
And I want to thank you, Lou. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say thank you. It was very clear, and on the heels of Family University and this most recent presentation with Mr. Heron, this is all really very exciting for our students.
It is. And thank you, Lou, for adding on slide 5, universal design for learning. My special education advocates didn't lose that. You saw that, and that's a way of acknowledging intentional design of learning for students with IEPs, that is, differentiated, and that at the same time isn't lowballing those students, but raising, the expectations and helping them to meet it. So thank you for including that. And I also know that you have plans to include students on your PBIS team.
Absolutely, absolutely. I felt that the PBIS committee needs to ground themselves first before we invite the students, because we want to be able to hit the ground running with the students. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Lou. Okay, moving on to our business items. There may be something added. I have a printout here that's got 10 on it. Is it still 10? I gotta get back to.
You have midterms, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Good luck.
Good luck. Take care.
And plus the addendum, right? It's business plus the addendum.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's 4A and B. It's business items addendum, which has 4 items on it as well. 2 items with 4 documents. Does anybody have any questions on any of these?
And I just wanted to mention we're looking at item 4A. There's a proposal for the differentiated instruction work that actually started on Friday. And it was, I think, well received by the educators at the middle school. And as I mentioned earlier, it's the basis for moving forward and hearing directly from the teachers with regards to those areas that they have an interest in. But it's, I'm sure, work that's going to be around for a while because it is so important. And, and certainly to the points that Lou made earlier, that, students don't all look the same, learn the same, have the same interests or readiness, or learning style, and we have to make sure that, all of the adults are comfortable, finding ways to differentiate the content, the process, the assessment, the learning environment. So it'll be really important work moving forward. And Ms. Szymanski was there, so I don't know if you wanted to mention anything about.
I did, actually. So the Professional Learning Committee I mentioned earlier, we sent a survey out, and then the group had the chance to analyze it. And when we did small group breakouts, one of the self-selected groups that looked at themes in the survey actually identified differentiated instruction as number one in terms of what the system was looking for in terms of support. So, that's highly relevant, so I just wanted to mention that.
I think I've mentioned this to you, Valerie, but if the work is successful in the middle school, that we may want to speak with the administration at Hillside regarding work on differentiated instruction as well. Given the greater variations in development in the younger students, it's a key skill set to have in working in the youngest grades.
Absolutely. And I think the work they're doing in the evolution of the reading writing workshop sort of inherently has some of that as kind of the philosophy built in, focusing on individual student needs and readiness. But I do think this certainly will complement the entire system. So you're absolutely right. And we will, as our leadership team, continue to share what's occurring and make available the resources when we meet together as a leadership team. And actually we'll have both Ms. Kipper and Mr. Keogh to present at our next leadership team meeting so that everyone can hear what took place, and then we can capitalize on the use of that consultant, to begin working with, the entire system.
The addendum 4B, so is this a grant for Helen?
I worked with the Edith Winthrop Teacher Center, and so they have some monies that are available, and with the right criteria, they will grant the money, and that's what they did. So it was no cost at all to the district, which is fantastic. She's quite excellent. Just to give you a sense, I didn't mention it during my administrative comments, but she received her teaching and doctoral qualifications from Cambridge University in England. And then she's built a reputation here throughout the region and throughout many districts in New York and New Jersey as a facilitator and developer. Her primary expertise is STEM and science education. She was a biology teacher earlier in her career. She leads workshops. She's doing one with Mercy right now, Mercy College, and as diverse as makerspaces, engineering in the classroom, science notebooks, sustainability. She's actually the past president of the Science Teachers Association of New York State and co-facilitator of the New York State Science Education Consortium, which is an advisory group that works very closely with New York State Ed on the implementation of the standards. She's extremely well connected at the state level and on the early edge of any information that's coming out around shifts, around assessments, around resources, and was extremely well received today by the group. And I suspect she will be as well as the work continues forward.
That's great. Thanks. So how does that work then? So we take the money in as a grant and then we pay the.
So we go through BOCES like we would with anything else in terms of a cross contract. And so then what happens is that's then sent to the Edith Winthrop Teacher Center, and then they pick it up for us. Yeah.
And if teachers do love it, and they've had these few sessions, is this something that we would apply for another grant next year, perhaps?
I can
and
certainly
add
try,
that?
yes. Yeah. She's quite something, actually, and I suspect that that will happen, and I tend to be pretty tenacious around securing funding, so looking at that, we can, do what we can.
Yeah.
So.
She's been around for a while.
She's
I
great.
know her from Clarkstown, and worked with all the science teachers, the elementary science educators there, and she's actually the author of the Science 21 curriculum. She's one of the main authors, so she's really quite accomplished.
I've also worked with her in the past in a different setting, and just wherever she goes, I only hear glowing things. So.
Okay, if there's any other questions on the first 10 or the second 2 and 4B? Do I have a motion to approve items in 4A and 4B?
So moved?
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, 4C, placement for CSE and CPSE services. Do I have a motion to approve these placements?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Personnel, does anybody have any questions under personnel?
I just want to acknowledge Mr. Chapas, who is an enormously successful lead replacement teacher while Mr. Merchant was trying out his role of interim director of physical education, health, and athletics. He loved it so much that he decided to become the director and drop the interim role, which then opened up the opportunity for Mike to remain here in the district. He had a choice to go someplace else and make a whole lot more. Chose to stay here. He did. I think that's worth mentioning. And, Jesse had a lot to do with that. Amy and John had a lot to do with that, and Melissa, so I want to thank all of them, but I'm most happy that, one of the things that he mentioned was the family of people who he works with at Hillside, and how much that, that's valuable. So it's not just, money, that means, it matters that you're able to make a living and, achieve your goals, but also who you work with and where you work matters a great deal. So he chose us for that reason.
Also want to just acknowledge the upcoming retirement of Joe Vaccaro, which won't be till the end of the school year, and so I'm sure we'll have much more to say about it, but I think it's always significant when someone has been here for so long and really had their whole career. I think he's had pretty much his whole career in the district. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I just saw him in the lunch line the other day, and he was happy as he could be to go on to the next phase of his life. He said nothing's wrong here in Hastings. He just has another plan, and he's accumulated enough years to put that plan into place. So congratulations to him as well.
Do I have a motion to approve the appointments, amendments, retirement, and leave of absence under 5?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Okay. Does anybody have any questions about the minutes from November 12th and December 16th?
You could add the timestamps to the very long meeting, and I will try to add some additional notes.
In the video?
The December 18th meeting. That's all been timestamped in the video because it was over 3 hours, the meeting.
I just think it's December 16th, 2019, but I'm saying it says 2020. Just change the
I have
date
to
there.
change the date.
December 16, 2019. The actual page says 2019,
Right.
just the title.
December
Do I have a motion to approve minutes from November 18 and December 16, 2019?
Yes, so moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor? Maureen, do you want to say something about the finance?
Well, she just took it off because it was scheduled for this evening, and then we had to reschedule it. So I think it's next week.
We had reported on the last meeting, right?
We did. It's, we're having our finance committee meeting next week, 22nd.
Okay, policies.
Yeah, there's a second read of 2 policies. They were presented at the last board meeting in December, so there was one typo that Tim found. In addition to that, if anyone has any questions or changes to those proposed policies, you can either let the policy committee know at our upcoming meeting before the next board meeting, or now.
This is the second read.
Did you
Yes.
pass them
Yeah,
tonight?
we're
or-
passing tonight.
I'm sure I didn't make the one change
I'll
that
make it.
that
I'm
Tim
sorry.
that
I
Tim
put
suggested.
both
It's a
together.
typo. Were there any other changes that anyone wanted to suggest? Okay.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve with the fix of the typo? 4231.4 and 9620. A second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, on the new business, did we want to table advocacy and talk about that next?
Absolutely.
Okay, so 9A, we're going to table, and talking about advocacy and some of the issues we may want to focus on, and we'll focus on 9B, and I'll pass the meeting to Dr. Henry Piedmont, or,
Sure.
yeah, okay.
Sure. So last month, we issued an RFP, a request for proposal, to conduct a special education program review for the Farragut Middle School. And the reason that we issued the RFP was that the cost would be greater than what's in our policy. So if we exceed $30,000, we have to issue an RFP for those services. So there were questions about, so why are we engaging in another program review of special education? Well, we actually, there were some differences between what Dr. Katzman did, which was wonderful, was more operational and district-wide. This particular program review for Farragut Middle School is to really focus on the instructional needs of students with IEPs and the progress of those students with IEPs at the middle school. So it's not only the data from our review of the assessments in ELA and mathematics is the basis for the review. It's also information from parents about experiences that their children are having. And I think what comes up over and over again is the fact that the schedule seems to be something that students, that doesn't seem to change, or it can't change. That's what I've heard from parents, is that, any questions about the schedule, it just cannot change. It doesn't change. And that has been, there have been some access issues, which again are, what's at the heart of ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, are 3 major tenets: student growth, access, and equity. And if students are, students with IEPs aren't able to access courses, that sets them up for the rest of their time as students. It is tracking on steroids. And it prohibits them from accessing courses. It's a stigma for students, and students are treated differently when there's a sense that they are, they need some additional assistance, unlike, that all students need at some point or another. So it's a social justice issue, in my opinion, with regards to, access for any student, not just students with IEPs. So this program review really gets at sort of the root cause of why, across the last number of years, some of our students with IEPs have continuously not made growth. Now, under ESSA is all about growth. And all different, there are 10 different groups of students, and you've heard Ms. Szymanski talk about this a lot. She'll be talking about it again when she does her update in another couple of months. Students are expected across the state to make certain growth targets. And that's, that group of students in any place, anywhere in the state of New York. And there's so many numbers associated with, that contributes to that growth measure. And it's students who take the test. You have to take the test. We're not talking about the opt-outers or the non-testers. We're talking about the students who are taking the test. And if there are barriers that are interfering with their ability to access content, are they being taught by, teachers who can differentiate instruction? Are they being assessed in ways where teachers can understand what they know, understand, and can do? Are they able to start with their class, their peers? If you have a student who, happens to also be interested in world language, and if that world language period is offered at the same time that resource room is, and there's no other opportunity, that is, a violation of ESSA, because we're supposed to offer access to students throughout. It shouldn't be a one-shot deal and it's over. And that student doesn't get back on the lane again for world language for another couple of years. And that's one more regents that a child could presumably get out of the way before they go into high school. So not being able to take those courses also prohibits those students from access to more rigorous courses, which is also what ESSA is about. And in doing so, there's certain AP courses and other kinds of offerings that they can never participate in because they're in that sort of catch-up mode. So knowing that that's some of the variables that certainly, as I said, I've heard about since I arrived, Szymanski's heard about since she's arrived. We've heard, across the board from a number of advocates, from TESPA, from Laura, who know a great deal more about this than we do. We just cannot move forward in addressing getting at the root cause without having this program review. So there were two proposals put forth. The inclusive schooling one actually is the one that came in at, they revised the price for us because I indicated to them that we could not afford them if they came in higher, and they cooperated. And they are, as you can see from Dr. Costin, who's the co-founder of Inclusive Schooling, is a, without a doubt, would be considered, someone with a CV like this has to be considered an expert, not only in writing, but in testifying and to committees, to coming in and doing an extensive number of program reviews across the state and the country. She's contributing to, as I said, the research on inclusive education and learning. Both she, all three actually, the people who are part of inclusive schooling, Jenna, Julie, and Kate were all former special educators. So they have a pretty good understanding of the landscape. So we're hoping that this program review really does get at the experiences of students. So it is looking at how students are scheduled. It looks at who's teaching them, how much time they're spending, in classes, what are the kinds of things that they're doing, and even their social emotional awareness, their social emotional, personas. How are they feeling about themselves? So the program review will involve not only classroom visits, interviews with teachers, focus groups. There'll be conversations with students and focus groups with students, an extensive document review that both Laura and Tesfa has organized. So it's really important information that helps us move forward, and as I said, really gets at the core, the root cause of some of the obstacles that are in the way that none of us would want for any child. And certainly if we know that's happening for this group of youngsters in middle school, we have to remove those barriers. So this proposal is a way to get at the root cause and once and for all deal with what's in the way.
Is there any HTA issue associated with the review? Because you have essentially crossing into observations.
Well, it's not a formal observation. It's going in and looking at the learning environment of the students. So it's never been, in my own experience, a problem with, they're not there. They're just there to see they're there to check on what the learning experience is for children. And they don't give any feedback on, a teacher doing X or Y, but this is the experience in the classroom. They look at the continuum, for students. How are we using resources? Are there unnecessary special classes? Are children segregated? In our interest to try to be to create the least restrictive learning environments? Are we, resegregating students, by different other configurations?
Yeah. Is there any need, or does it make sense to have the conversation with HTA leadership just to clarify that this is not, in no way is this intended to be observation or in any way sort of a backdoor approach to something that just, if there's any, my point being, if there's any HTA paranoia around additional scrutiny of practice, the point is just to alleviate any concerns up front as a preventive measure to avoid. I'm just trying to look around the corner of where there could be. I think from a board standpoint, I think from an administration standpoint, I think it's fairly straightforward why it makes sense. Just try to think about what friction the district you could face as this commences.
Right, and I'll also explain how difficult it'll be for this district to get out of being targeted if we don't. I mean, I think that is also a disincentive for not doing this, is that it helps all of us to learn how to, use our expertise and to, tap into that of others, but, so that, it's to ensure that we're also using our resources effectively. So, but your point is well taken, that we definitely will share what this entails, so that there isn't a narrative that it's about targeting teachers.
Alleviate any unnecessary fear.
Exactly.
How do you follow up once all the recommendations have been made? How do you gauge your success in having followed these steps?
I think the value of an organization like Inclusive Schooling is that they also provide, they will be writing a report with recommendations and also professional learning that would complement and support those recommendations, and they can also conduct that professional learning. So that's why they are also kind of they stand out as an entity that provides this. So it's not just the program review, but it's also a report that the district can use to continue to focus on how to ensure the success of all students and how to deal with some of the issues that might have been in the way that are not necessarily about what teachers do. I mean, there are some structural things that are in the way, and that this is a a document done by people who know what they're looking at, and that will help us to make our plans moving along in the future in terms of whether it's budgeting or use of resources. So we look forward to that report that will come forth, and then that the reviewers will meet with the team and talk to us about those. So we just don't get a report and we read it, but we have the opportunity to hear from the reviewers, some of the backstory and other relevant details that would be helpful in understanding it.
Thoughts or comments? So I think we want to vote on this tonight as a business item to approve. Is that correct?
And where are we coming in now, total cost? I looked at the contract, but just give me the update on where we were. I remember the last time this was talked about, there was some, so just where was the original sort of soft circle of what the cost was going to be a couple weeks ago, and where are we now on cost?
When I originally put this forth to the board, I believe the indication was it would be under 40, or it would be no more than 40. And as a result of, as I said, going back out to and asking, how this program review could be conducted in a condensed time without compromising the quality of it, we were able to get a quote of $22,000.
Yeah, like 2 6.5s and a 9,000. So okay, great. Good to ask the question. Okay.
So to have a motion to approve the inclusive schooling contract?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Okay, second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Second public comment? Anyone?
Are you a Hastings resident?
Very quickly. Rihanna Platt, live in Hastings. I have a child in 9th grade and a 7th grader. And on behalf of my 7th grader and every other child that is going to be coming up through the middle school that has learning disabilities or that is differentiated today, thank you very much, because this review is definitely something that we need so that our kids are not being excluded from classes and that they are given the same opportunities as all the other children. So thank you.
Any Board of Ed comments? Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?